Sup mortals, today we're talking about God of War 4, released for the PlayStation April 20th, 2018. I've played the main God of War trilogy and I was quite surprised that they were continuing with Kratos' story, all things considering. Before my beautiful best friend bought me God of War for my birthday, I heard a lot of conflicting viewpoints. Some saying it revolutionized gaming, storytelling, was the end-all be-all. Others were like, it's good, but it's not that good, calm down. Where do I stand on that line? Well, keep watching. God of War uses Nordic mythology to tell a compelling story of father and son, Kratos and Atreus, or informally known as
Boy.
They set on a personal quest to scatter Atreus' mother's ashes from the highest mountain in all the realms. It's a very straightforward task, met with paternal struggles, external struggles, and dry humor, oddly fitting to a serious God of War title.
What are we hunting?
You are hunting deer.
Which way?
In the direction of deer.
Okay,
The contrast of Atreus, helpful and innocent personality, and Kratos, blunt and cold persona, made for amusing dialogue. More so than the actual story itself, I would like to talk about how God of War matured, as that is one of the more notable things about this game. As someone who's played the main God of War trilogy, seeing Kratos go from a one-dimensional angry Spartan to a feeling father, and this is important, without compromising his character, was a joy to experience. What I mean by this is while he's struggling to show affection, he eventually learns how to express it without turning into a sissy bitch. Kratos is still Kratos, but we're seeing an entirely different, but welcomed, side of him. Atreus brings out a new part of Kratos, something us players have never seen, or frankly could ever imagine. Seeing him as a father, after all he's been through. While I miss the old, forever angry Kratos, this was an absolutely refreshing take on PlayStation's IP. And if you haven't played the main trilogy, small moments won't have the same impact.
What are you doing? Now his guard is up. Only fire. Only fire. When I tell you to fire.
I'm sorry.
Do not be sorry. Be better.
One thing about God of War 4 was its lack of bosses, as there were only 3, one you fight twice, and not counting bosses that later become common enemies like ogres and trolls. Also, God of War's lack of epic moments. I understand that this would have been against the tone of this particular entry. Your mission isn't to kill, but to deliver ashes, but the epicness of boss fights was something that made the God of War series stand out. How over-the-top, brutal, and frequent the deaths were. There were large beings where you really thought you were going to fight them, but you never do, and this was such a tease. And speaking of teases, later in game you're able to visit 6 out of the 9 realms, 3 of them being unavailable the entirety of the game. Which makes me believe DLC and, well, you know how the end of the game goes. Because this game is pretty damn short, even if you do side missions. That said, New Game Plus was recently announced and who knows what they'll add. Also, I do note that Cory Barlog, the director of God of War 4, said that this is meant to be a trilogy, so obviously they're going to build up to, well, play the game. It's pretty obvious. Because God of War is going to be spread into 3 games, that's why they're withholding some good stuff. And upon doing even more research, this game seems to be taking a similar approach to the first God of War game, as God of War 1 only had 4 bosses, and God of War 2 had a shit ton. If you've played this game and think about it, they really have no reason to have so many enemies at this point in the story. Still, I was looking forward to more unique fights. Before we roll on into the gameplay, I want to address the Norse mythology, which I was entirely unfamiliar with. I've heard of Yggdrasil, the world serpent, but I had no idea it was Nordic. Pretty much I only knew Odin, Thor, and Loki. As I went through the game, I became frustrated with not knowing things as the previous God of War games, as it was centered around Greek mythology, which I was very familiar with. Greek gods, monsters, and other famous figures. To alleviate my problem, I did research on Norse mythology, and ended up enjoying the game a lot more, knowing these notable characters and their history. Some would say it would spoil the game for you, and I mean to a degree, but I also would argue certain moments fall flat if you didn't know the significance of a particular item or person. Or you'd get a heightened experience when little things like killing Odin's ravens, which in mythology he had 2 that would circle the world at dawn and return to him by supper, whispering the events of the world for that day. In this game, they're Odin's spies, which is implemented as a clever mini side quest. The tone of God of War isn't the only thing that's changed. Hefty alterations were made to God of War's gameplay, which I had conflicting feelings on. When scenes play out, the camera may shift, but it never cuts, which I really enjoyed. Where the camera got on my nerves was fighting. I hate not being able to see what's behind me. There are arrows at the bottom of the screen that change color, letting you know of an incoming attack or projectile. But they weren't obvious in capturing your attention. If anything, I found Atreus yelling, "Behind you!" more helpful. Speaking of which, Atreus is incredibly helpful in battle, stunning enemies with his arrows or holding enemies in place. As the game continues, he progressively becomes more useful. Kratos at the start uses the Leviathan axe, that can do light or heavy attacks, even use it as a projectile and call it back. Kratos' attacks felt weighted and powerful. Having the controller set to vibrate on each hit was a good choice. As you earn experience, it can be traded for skills, and when mastered, it greatly changes the tide of battle. He can also use his bare hands. Once the stun bar of the enemy is filled by punching with your bare hands or arrow attacks, Kratos can do some gruesome cinematic finishers. And lastly, there's Spartan Rage, which after your rage bar is full, you go full Spartan, dishing insane damage. The learning curve is incredibly real, and death is frequent. Enemies no longer drop health orbs, but health stones, rage stones, materials, and gold. Thankfully, God of War offers the player a second chance by introducing resurrection stones, which bring Kratos back into the fight. Enemies have their levels listed above them, and if you keep dying, sometimes it's best to come back later, after you're matched. Your level is strictly determined by equipment. Upgrade your equipment and reach its fullest potential. Upgraded equipment also has socket slots, which are used to equip enchantments that grant additional buffs. Runes can be upgraded with coin. We have a heavy attack and a light attack rune that can each be equipped to your weapon, granting special attacks. Even Atreus uses summon runes that call upon an animal and inflict damage, or sometimes stuns the enemy. As you upgrade yourself, the game levels itself out. I'm gonna be honest, this is the one thing I really hated about God of War. I'm a firm believer when you fight enemies, you gain experience that goes toward your base level. Then you put on equipment to enhance your natural strength. Unfortunately, in God of War, if you downgraded any of your equipment, your level went down with it. Equipment was only upgraded through materials and gold, which meant you had to grind for materials, which I hate doing. I had a rough time upgrading equipment. This is something I really hope they change in future entries. As God of War takes place in an entirely new land, it was a great idea to push the player to explore, something we never had to experience in the trilogy. God of War slowly opens up the world to you, with several realms with beautiful environments to explore, with different islands to uncover. No realm felt like another. My only complaint is through this game you'll only be able to experience 6 of the 9. While exploring you find Nornir chest, destroy all the hidden runes corresponding to that chest in a timely manner, and get either an Ithen apple or a horn of blood mead. Collect 3 apples to increase your health, or 3 blood meads to increase your Spartan Rage bar. Mentioned earlier, while adventuring, you'll find Odin's ravens, Odin's hidden chambers housing some powerful enemies, helping spirits, learning lore, and other treasures. They also made traveling less grueling by adding a fast travel option through the world in between realms. While it isn't exactly instant transportation, but a welcome service for sure. Navigation was great, a marker at the top guiding you to your objective. You're even able to add side quest markers as well. The map is detailed and easy to follow. The only issue is the super small text. The graphics are absolutely breathtaking, smooth and solid, never experienced any sort of lag, easy to get enchanted by the main realms and characters. They did such a great job with the realms looking unique, bearing no resemblance to another. Each area had environmental dangers and fun puzzles. There's not really much to say here other than it speaks for itself. If I had to say something, I wasn't really digging the beard on Kratos, but I guess you could say it kinda grew on me. Now when I look back at his older pictures, I'm like, oh, he was a baby before. There's also a photo mode if you want to take fun pictures. Didn't mess with it much, but it was hella amusing to see Kratos smile for a change. Finally, the music? Chanting? I don't know how to describe it other than epic. The music I don't have strong feelings toward. It's like when you heard it, it was fine. When you didn't, it was replaced by ambient sound. You really only heard it during emotional moments or fighting. I like what I heard when I heard it, and out of the small soundtrack, I'm partial to the theme. Enjoy the song God of War, as it encompasses what a God of War would sound like. And that brings me to my score, 8 out of 10. I know some of you guys are like, oh, she's just being edgy. No, it's how it ended and what they withheld from you. I just felt... the realms you should have went to, the lack of boss battles. In regards to the combat, I hate the leveling up system and the indicators could use some work. All bitching aside, this is the mature version of the game that we know and love as God of War, which established itself in being grandiose, unmerciful, and one-dimensional. I briefly touched up on it, but taking away some of the boss battles, you saw large figures where you swore you were going to fight, and you just didn't. I felt robbed. Being that the new path that God of War is on, I do believe that was a very intentional design choice. But man, it really snatched away something I really cherished in the series. But everything else, the storytelling, the characters, the dialogue, the combat, was spot on. So did God of War 4 revolutionize gaming and storytelling, blah blah blah? No. Did it do so and take itself to new heights within its respective series? Absolutely. Anyone who has played God of War 4, I believe, would agree that this is by far the most distinct entry of the series. To wrap things up, here's the end question. Do you find it more enjoyable knowing about a mythology a game is implementing, or do you think it robs you of the experience? Essentially, spoiling you a bit. Thank you so much for watching. Top box is more reviews like this. Bottom box is my Let's Play channel. I appreciate ya. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that bell, you know, the YouTube drill, yada yada. Bless you, and I'll see you next time. Personally, after experiencing this game, I definitely like to know the mythology beforehand. Sure, it spoils a few things, but not in a way where it ruins the experience.